But you have to start one, you have to bench one, and you have to trade one. And this is the Swolecast edition. Start, bench, trade.
I will
David
definitely
Kitchen,
answer this question.
Davis Maddock, and our good friend Tuttle, Dan Gasper.
This is awesome. All right, so we're gonna bench Tuttle because Tuttle benches himself like 75% of the episode. So this one's not even going to be hard. He just self-excludes from the majority of the episodes. I'm starting David Kitchen. He is the host of the show. I don't think the show works without Kitchen opening it up with a hear ye, being like sometimes good at hosting, but just sometimes so bad at it. Like we have to start him. Like the show starts and ends with David Kitchen. And then I'm trading Davis Maddock, not because I don't want to do the show with him, but I think he's going to fetch the most in a trade. I don't think, Tuttle's too low key. Like, I don't know if other GMs know what he brings to the table. Kitchen, I mean, someone's going to go to his Twitter feed and be like, I'm not trading shit for this guy. Like right now, you're going to go to Davis Maddock. They're like, this guy's live 8 hours a day. He's tweeting nonstop. Like this kid's hustling. I think Davis could fetch, a fair purse in a trade.
Welcome to another episode of Best Ball Bros.
Give me your click, but you don't have to listen.
Oh, you had Gabriel Davis at 67%? Oh, sweetie, that's so hot.
Can I curse on the show?
Absolutely.
I was so fucking bad.
How can I lose? And the answer was by starting Allen Robinson over Jamar Chase.
Well, last year kind of attached myself to Trey Sermon, which hasn't worked out too well.
Bill, if you ever listen to this, I love you. He's just such a boomer now that it's painful.
I did think I was going to play in the NBA when I was like 6.
I'm going to tell Evan Silva they're bored. Went to the bathroom and just told Evan, hey man, this is the top 15.
People love the life hacks, dude.
All right, episode 2 of the new Best Ball Bros here at Spike Week, and I'm super excited to bring on, of course, one of the GOATs, Peter Overzet, who famously, Pete, I have to get this in at the beginning, famously, we co-drafted one of the best ball teams of all time, somewhere in the top 100 best ball teams of all time. Don't fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that it is true. And today we're going to get into some more fun stuff. Not necessarily, I know the show, if you have not watched last week's episode with Pat Crane, it is titled Best Ball Bros, but it's not necessarily going to be a best ball or fantasy football focused podcast. We're going to try to get to know some of your favorite analysts, a little bit about their background, and just some fun, silly questions, some answers to some things that they have probably not been asked on certainly on a fantasy football podcast here today. And we know Pete will nail some of these questions. But first, Pete, I like to just kind of get a quick little background. Like Pete Overzet was born, and now Pete Overzet is here doing daily best ball, fantasy football, battle royale, doing all of this crazy content. How the hell did we get from, young Pete Overzet growing up, wanting to be an NBA player? I remember that one, to today. Like, how did we reach this point?
It's funny. I literally had one of the moments last night because I was showing my wife a clip. I did a Fantasy Life. They were doing our favorite Super Bowl prop bets, and I was showing her this clip where I joked that my favorite crazy bet was if Donna Kelsey would show cleavage at the Super Bowl. And I said to Lauren, I was like, it is pretty insane that this is my job, to go on shows and say shit like this that is completely useless. So yeah, how we got here, it still blows my mind, especially now too, thinking about, we've been talking to the Swolecast channel, and, Davis has been making content since some of our viewers were literally in middle school. And they were pulling up old man's videos that are literally now 10-year anniversary of when I started doing some of that stuff. I believe right about 10 years ago was when Pat and I had started doing Fantasyland. Around then, the details are a little fuzzy, but yeah, I mean, I had a software job for a long time when I moved out to Boston. That was kind of my first real job here. And it was one of those where you just kind of cruise, punch in, punch out. And I had started doing improv comedy, basically as a way to meet friends. Because when I moved out here, I really only knew my wife and her friends. And I was like, it'd be nice to have this outlet. I always kind of thought I would be good at it, kind of quick on my feet. And then that led to meeting some friends within the improv world who also loved fantasy football. And we started doing the Fantasy Football Comedy Hour as a live show, turn it into a podcast. And that's where I started to, reach out to people like Soccer Dave, be like, hey, you want to come on this podcast? And that just basically kind of snowballed into all of this stuff that I now do.
When do you think the deciding factor, because even from that, right, it started with like you said, fantasy, like Pat detailed this a little bit last week, so I'm not going to force you to go into it either, but also he mentioned that it was like a split on coming up with the name Ship Chasing. He even dug through the email archives to find the literal conversation that you guys had about naming Ship Chasing.
Did he?
Because it was like high stakes dynasty championship football show or something. I'm screwing it up, but
it was high stakes diaries.
Yeah, it was something horrible. And then you guys finally got down to, and I think he said championship, like chasing or something. And you were the one that was like, I think it's just a little long. Let's do Ship Chasing. So, but how did it even go from like, just doing, right? Like you and I met when we were both kind of in that role. Like we're doing something else, but we're doing fantasy football content like on the side or what have you. How did it like accelerate? What was kind of the moment you think that like it really took off for you?
It was COVID. COVID was like a huge tipping point because I was basically doing all this stuff. Like I had been doing the Swolecast. I'd been doing videos for RG basically on the side. I remember like, I was doing those comedic shorts like each week for RG. And I would like either like record those late at night or like run home during my lunch break to record those. And so I'd basically been doing that just like, hey, work during the day and like late at night do kind of comedy and make content. And then COVID happened. And of course, like everybody, you're now working from home. And I'm sitting here like looking around and I'm like, wow, I have all my editing equipment, the stuff I was away from and couldn't do literally being in the office. Now I can start sprinkling this in throughout the day. Now I can start doing this. And it just so happened that was like when Underdog got going and I had my Underdog deal. And I kind of was on this tipping point of like, man, should I go for this? And kind of my first Underdog deal basically gave me kind of the, I don't know, the courage essentially to be like, all right, I think I can like do the starving artist thing for a little bit and quit my job and do this full time. And that was like, Lowell started then with Brick, was born out of COVID. And basically all of my streaming basically started when COVID hit. Cause it was like, all right, let's, there's nothing else to do.
Yeah. I think we all found that you found a very healthy way to express your kind of boredom and panic during that time, and other people day traded Malcolm Brogdon top shots.
I mean, I was doing that too, but luckily a little less than I was streaming. Those days that was the Wild West for me. I mean, I've had darker times, that is for sure, but the moments looking back, like if I went through the transaction history, like the transaction log on my Top Shot account from like, I specifically remember like reading the Bales article and being like, maybe it was just my mental state at that time, just being like, this is the greatest thing of all time. And then diving in for 6 months, just being like a full blown obsessed, right? Day trading, this kind of stuff. I'm looking back on YouTube right now. So for anybody watching this on YouTube, I'm just going to share super quickly. This was 4 years ago. When I searched, like we were still even using, still even using the StreamYard 30-second intro, like 317 views. Like you get 317 live viewers on every single show that you have right now. Like I'm joking, but the acceleration and the way like that the trajectory of kind of your career in this space, I really do think is just awesome and cool to see, because it was just you took a shot and bet on yourself, and obviously you're super talented, but it was like you committed to something and you went from, like, that's 4 years ago, dude. You and I 4 years ago streamed a best ball draft
and it still has 300 views.
Yeah,
and
go back and
now-
watch it, people.
Please don't. I don't want to. You weren't using dark mode on the on the screen. Like, it's so funny to go back and look at that and now see where we've come. And it was really just you committing, right? Like there isn't like some crazy story. You just went all in.
Yeah, and I think now, and I mean, anyone who makes content kind of thinks about these things. Like, there's this meta aspect to the algorithms and like figuring out like what people like, what gets people to click, what gets people to continue watching. And I think, obviously, I think you have to think about those things at this stage if you are making a living. Like, it kind of would be irresponsible not to. But I think what was nice, like looking back at that time, is there was like I was not thinking about optimizing anything. It was just like, this is what I fucking love to do, and this is really fun. And at the time, like, the best ball space wasn't saturated, and not that that's a bad thing, but just saying it's not as saturated as it is now, where it was like, if people wanted to go watch a best ball stream, that was probably the only one available for them to go watch at the time. And so that felt like fresh and new to me. But yeah, I think that was the thing of like, all the stuff I did was just stuff I would like to do otherwise for free, or stuff that I would consume on my own. And I think that's what made, like, looking back on it, is there was like no, like, obviously you want to make a living out of whatever you're putting time into, but at the time you basically have no expectations. It's just like, this is super fun. I really want to do this every day.
Would you say that that's still kind of like the driving force though? Like, like you said, you have to do some, right? The optimizing behind the scenes and right, thumbnails, and you got to make the silly faces and do all the little things that help people find, not just like click and watch and enjoy, but find your content. But it does seem to me like you found, right, kind of like the perfect, like, middle ground isn't even the right term, but you're literally doing a lot of the stuff that you just enjoy. And I think that can get lost sometimes in the space of like hacking algorithms, and you are right. You love fantasy football and you like playing Battle Royale and you like talking to Brick about whatever's going on in the fantasy space. It feels like you're still doing that, really.
Yeah. People use the phrase like North Star. I would say that is like, I sometimes say, like, okay, what if I won BBM like Karain or whatever, like how would my life be different if I didn't need to, work hard to make a living? No, Pat is working hard. I have to keep caveating this. He could theoretically not work hard if he didn't want to. But I don't think what I'm doing would be that different. I really think it would be very similar. And so that generally tells me I'm in a pretty good spot. Like, if I'm doing what I would be doing with no, I guess, financial pressure or whatever. So yeah, I do feel good about that. I mean, it is hard. Like, I'm sure you've thought about this or feel this sometimes too, of like balancing that of like, should I be doing more? Should I be doing things differently? Should I not be so stubborn about only doing things I really love and want to do for the sake of growth? And I do tend to be like, I think of it as like playing a longer game and being sustainable. Like, the fact that I wake up and I'm not dreading basically anything I have to do. Sure, there's some like administrative stuff behind the scene that feels tedious, but to really not dread anything I'm doing each day, like, I'm like, I just got to keep doing that. If I can survive and feel like that, then I feel like I'm in a good place.
That's you just described this show. I could do a bunch more draft streams that'll probably get a bunch of views and get more subscribers and all that kind of stuff. But we're never going to be the biggest YouTube channel. We're never going to be the biggest fantasy football site. But I have specifically committed to exactly what, like, you have to do. There's certain things you have to do. That's just life. But I want it to be like, because I feel like people can feel, like, for you specifically, people can feel that you're having fun and you're enjoying this. And I think there's, as much as the algorithm and all that kind of stuff, showing up and feeling like, I always describe it as like, I'm sitting at the bar next to Pete, right? I'm watching him on my phone or my, computer or tablet or whatever, but I feel like I'm just hanging out with buddies at the bar. And there's something to be said for that. And the moment you start doing the things that you don't like to do, like, now you're the miserable drunk at the bar as opposed to the buddy at the bar. And I feel like I will continue to come back and watch you guys because that's how I feel. I mean, it's a little cheating for me because obviously I have a relationship with you, but I think that's how everybody feels. Like they feel like you guys are their friends. They feel like every time they show up to a Pete video or any piece of content, they're like, no, like that's, if I met Pete in person, like we'd have a beer together type of a thing. And I think that's like just as powerful, probably more powerful than anything in kind of the content space.
Yeah, I mean, I know because it's the same thing for me, right? Like I can open up my podcast app, and I think I've actually mentioned this on a show before. And Corinne actually thinks I'm psychotic for it. I basically treat my podcast app like an email inbox. Like I subscribe to a ton of podcasts, and I just like treat it like an inbox, and I'm just like swipe. Like I know a lot of people are like, I have my favorite podcasts. They auto download. I'm going to listen to everyone, but I kind of like I'm like, oh, what are the topics? Like what's going on in this comedy area of the world? What guests are on? What's going on in the politics? And then if something like stands out to me, I'll download it and listen to it. So I kind of just like pick. And I still find myself like, oh, this is a cool topic, but I'm going to listen to Davis and Pat. I'm going to listen to you guys, like, because I want to hang out with my friends. And it's like, I have all this content and I'm going to listen to the same people. I know exactly what they think about everything. And I still just want to hang out and hear what they're talking about that day.
Right. That's I think that's one of the most fascinating parts of like fantasy football is I know I talk to Pat a lot too, right? Like we famously or infamously record very, very long podcasts. We're both not brief. So I kind of tend to know what he thinks about, right? Like if I ask him about Cam Scattaboo, I kind of know what he thinks, right? Just like you, for 10 years, you've talked to this guy about every minute detail of fantasy football. You know what he thinks, and yet you will still tune in and listen to him talk to someone else for 2 hours about a subject because, like you said, that like tribal, that friend relationship is so powerful. And so I think you've like just nailed that whole part of it. And I think that's the goal that everybody should strive to. Is like that's how you sustain not just success but sanity and fun and all that kind of stuff is achieving that. So you mentioned the podcast, one of my questions. Let's just do top three. You now made it more difficult on yourself because you just said, right, you treat it like an email. You treat it like Tinder, right? You just swipe every single day. Is Tinder still a thing? I really don't know, but top three podcasts that you probably listen to the most.
Yeah. And the best way, is like which podcast am I like never gonna miss one? I'll do some like genre hopping. So I mentioned like comedy podcasts. There's this one, it's called Hollywood Handbook. Hayes Davenport, Sean Clements. They are more like writers in LA as far as opposed to performers. But it is such an absurdly like niche podcast where it's like the whole show is basically just like references upon references to stuff that has happened, where it's basically like if you listen to one right now, it's like virtually inaccessible. But the people who have that along for the ride enjoy every single bit of it.
That's the best.
And the original premise of the show was like they were telling they're friends with a lot of big Hollywood people because they've worked on so many shows, so they get big guests, but they just are like overtly like mean to them, like in a comedic way. And they're like telling them how they should be doing their press release for their shows, or like they're talking like they constantly condescend and talk down to their guests as characters. So that's one of my favorites. I love those guys. Second one, I'll do Plain English is a podcast on the Ringer Network. And it is by Derek Thompson, and he's a writer. He's written for The Atlantic, and he just like covers this like wide breadth of topics. And it's basically like, you read like, I used to read more like magazine articles, like in The Athletic or something, where it's like, oh, this culturally relevant topic. And he basically does a podcast each week about some interesting thing. Like the one I just listened to is like, what's the truth about alcohol, cancer, and your health? But it's not like, how like a Huberman podcast is like 4 hours and like super dense. This is like really casual, really, he's smart, but he also, it's the name of the podcast is Plain English. It's like really trying to simplify things in a digestible way. And so that one, I never miss an episode. And then the third one, I'll go with the Knowledge Project by Shane Parrish. He's this really smart dude. I read one of his books last year. And
super smart.
Are you familiar with him?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so he brings on, it's I would say it definitely has like a niche or a lane, but like the guests he brings on, like sometimes they'll be from fitness. It definitely skews towards like business and entrepreneurship, but he'll bring on all different types of guests. I've been listening to one lately that he had like the power of storytelling, and he has this novelist on who talks and breaks down all of the elements of good storytelling. And I really, really like that one a lot.
That's funny. I haven't heard the name Shane Parrish in a little while, and I was not aware of his podcast. I follow him on all the social media and
nice
and stuff. So I need to go check that out, because I will definitely like that one. But I do want to quickly finish the kind of Pete Overzet background story, non like content career stuff. You said I moved to Boston. Where were you like born? What was the like upbringing, right? Like, did you play? I always, people are curious about this, especially on fantasy football, right? Like, did you play sports? Did you play football? Did you play basketball? Did you, right? Like, what was the kind of like Peter Overzet youth?
Yeah. Like, I guess what would be some interesting things. So yeah, I went to a private Christian school through 8th grade. And then because I was really into basketball and like my school just had this really rinky dink program, I ended up going to the big public school by my house, basically all for basketball purposes. Not like I was some prodigy by any means. It's just like, hey, they actually have like a nice program. Let's go there. And so that was like an interesting, like fish out of water thing. I went from a class of like 23 kids at a private Christian school to a public high school with nearly 2,000 kids where I knew no one. I had no frame of reference. So crazy. Yeah, I played basketball.
Where was it? Where was it?
In Colorado, suburb of Denver. Yep. Called Green Mountain High School. And what's really funny is I was obsessed with basketball. Obviously, I was like gym rat, did all the like traveling team stuff. I did not get my growth spurt until like senior year into college, essentially.
Oh,
like,
wow.
I grew like 2. So I was always super short. Like now I'm 6'1". Like people, like they see me in the fantasy space. So they're like, oh, Pete's taller than I thought or whatever. In high school, I was so short, which was not good for basketball. And what happened was I put my like heart and soul into basketball like that. I wanted it to be a thing so bad. And my coach ended up being like one of the best recruiters in the state of Colorado. And he was just coaching kids left and right. And it was like every time I was going to get a chance to like start on varsity, he's like, yeah, we have a 6'8" Dutch kid who now moved. And that sounds like I'm just pulling that out. No, literally Martin, 6'8", could fucking stroke it. And I'm like, how am I ever going to get on the court with this shit? And so I was just like perpetually, I was literally like our 6th man for like 3 straight years.
You're Lou Williams. They're never going to put you in the starting lineup.
No, like when I was a freshman, we had a freshman team and they were like, you know, we're going to put you on JV, you know, like they were, I was like on the track and I was like, this is great. And then these guys who were a foot taller than me and way better. And so what was so funny is my senior year, I remember the first day of practice, and it's funny because this will tie into, you know, fantasy and all this. My friends and I had gotten obsessed with poker. And we were playing every day. And I remember it was time to show up for like literally the first practice of senior year. And I'm looking at the depth chart and I know I'm 6th, 7th man again, heading into my senior year, same bullshit. I was like, fuck it. I'm not doing this. I'm going to go play poker every afternoon with my other friends and not do this basketball shit. And that was like a very rewarding feeling. And I ended up becoming like I was like, get me out of Colorado. Like I'm done with this shit. So I wanted to go to school in California. So I ended up going to a small private school called Point Loma. Then I met my wife studying abroad. We were both in the same program in Granada, Spain. My wife is from the East Coast. When I graduated from college, I didn't have a job. And I did the reverse Karain and moved from San Diego to the East Coast. And here we are.
That is so wild. It's also wild because literally yesterday, I'm at the gym and I run into a guy that I played AAU basketball with from 3rd grade to 9th grade. And I haven't seen him in a decade, probably.
Wow.
And it's funny because, super long story short, I had one of those like kind of come to Jesus moments with basketball, just like you did. Luckily, I did not follow through with this because basically my sophomore year of I always thought I was going to play basketball. My dad was a high school football coach, but I was fine. at football. Football really wasn't like a game changer, but I played like basketball was my thing, right? We traveled the country playing AAU basketball. Like I thought that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Turns out being a 5'11" white kid, like you're probably not going to go play in the NBA. But as a sophomore, our high school basketball coach basically came to a few of us and said, like, you're going to get to compete for the starting point guard job. And he didn't really follow through with that. He kind of shuffled the deck chairs instead of giving one of us a job. And so in my sophomore year, I wasn't getting to play at all. And that kid that I ran into at the gym yesterday, his dad was our AAU coach, and he was the high school coach at like the school like right next door to me, 10 minutes away. And I finally came home mid-season of my sophomore year of high school, and I was like, I'm fucking done with this. Like I'm literally not getting in the game. I start on the JV team over a kid who plays more than me on the varsity team, and I'm like, I'm done. Like like I said, I thought I was going to play college basketball. I come home, you know, I'm probably crying and being a little misfit, and I'm like, can we call Coach McCrary? Was his name? Can we call Coach McCrary? Like, he always told me I can come to East. That's the school. Like I can go to East if I want to. And like we call him, like I'm gonna go move in with this guy. I'm 14 or 15 or whatever, and I'm thinking like I'm gonna pull some, like I'm LeBron's kid or some shit, right? Like it's just the things that we luckily, like I said, my dad finally was like, let's pause. Let's calm down a little bit. And then, like same thing. I grew, like I got faster. And then I played college football. I didn't even play college basketball, but it's just funny the little things like that happen in our childhood. And it is funny that poker was part of it, because poker is such a big part of kind of the world that we live in, although indirectly.
And it's fun. And you'll hear so much of, obviously, I first started playing fantasy sports in high school too. The story, my introduction was there's this kid a year older than me, also played basketball, and we would go to the library during our free period, and Yahoo had their fantasy basketball, but we didn't have enough time to do a full draft, but they had an option where you could just basically auto generate the draft and get your team. And what we would do was go in there and just auto generate teams until we liked one. Like I literally remember like RNGing it, being like, no, I want Paul Pierce. Like I want Paul Pierce, like on this team. And then like we'd like barely manage it, but it was all the high of just like getting it spit out of like what our team was. And that was literally my introduction to fantasy sports.
You're doing the same thing as a career now. Like
exactly.
They're spitting out, right? You join, you're like, oh, got the 101. Beautiful, right? Like you're spitting every day. You spend 45 minutes a day like spitting out, doing that exact same thing you were doing when you were 15 years old.
112, push the plane. I'm done with it. Don't want it. Yeah.
Yep. Ah, shit. Didn't get Paul Pierce. All right. Right. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next one, which is also funny because it's not that Paul Pierce wasn't great, but we have those moments in best ball too. We're like, oh man, 2 years ago, right? I keep getting the 112. I'm so pissed. The underdog hates me, and it's like, buddy, all the 112 teams made the finals because they had CeeDee Lamb on them, and you just never know. And that's an eternal thing that we will always deal with. Super quick, favorite NBA players from when you were growing up, since you're a big basketball guy.
Yeah. So early. I had a few stages. One, I somehow ended up, and I know this is like the classic bandwagon thing, and I got a lot of shit for it in high school, but I ended up loving Duke. I remember, obviously, the Christian Laettner thing. I remember my parents, recording those games. So I was a big Duke guy there. As far as NBA, the chalk answer, of course, was like Jordan. Loved watching Jordan. But the guy who like I really resonated with was John Starks. On the Knicks, because he was like the underdog. Like I was like, he's the short guy, and like
interesting for a non-Knicks fan to say John.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I think they had that playoff series with the Bulls, and I think I just ended up watching him on a few primetime like Sunday afternoon triple headers, against Jordan or whatever. And I was like, I like this guy. Like he's short and he's like willing to go head to head against Jordan. So I liked him a lot. And then obviously the Nuggets, growing up in Denver, I remember when the Nuggets upset the Supersonics as the 8 seed. And you had the Dikembe Mutombo, waving the finger there. And then I remember, so then the next series they played the Jazz, and my parents wouldn't let me stay up to watch those games, and they would record them on VHS. And the next day I would watch it. And I'm just, I had my heart, ripped out watching the Nuggets lose to the Jazz after pulling off that huge upset, Hornacek and Karl Malone,
Stockton
Carter
and Malone and Hornacek
Stockton.
and Byron Russell. Yeah, that fucking team. Yep.
So I would say those were my mid 90s for sure. Nuggets, Jordan, John Starks, and Duke. Those were my guys.
We're about the same age. Did you wear basketball jerseys growing up? Obviously, I have one behind me, so you can tell that I went here in St. Louis. That was when I was from 8 to 15 or whatever. Basketball jerseys, for whatever reason, was a huge thing of our youth. Did you wear were there any of the jerseys that you used to wear?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had again the chalk ones. Had the Jordan. I think my coolest one that I had. Do you remember the Detroit Pistons that were an aqua, almost color turquoise?
They only had those jerseys for 2 years.
Yeah, and I had a Grant Hill, so it was the Duke connection, and then that one, that I lived in that jersey. I love that one.
Man, Grant Hill, what could have been? I just went to my first OKC Thunder game.
Oh, nice.
This year, highly recommend if you ever want to go watch an NBA. I'm trying to see a lot of these guys before. So the Warriors were in town and I wanted to see Steph. I've never seen Steph in person. Go to Oklahoma City to watch it. It is nuts. If you mentioned enjoying Duke, the atmosphere of Cameron Indoor is like for an NBA arena. That's how the Thunder felt. It was so. My voice was gone the next day, and I talk for a living, right? I'm not Taylor Swift, but I couldn't speak the next day. I wasn't rooting for anybody. The crowd was so loud. The game was so crazy. It was also the game that Chet Holmgren broke his hip. When he fell and broke his hip right in front of us. But Steph did the night, literally ran right past us and did the night. It was one of the coolest experiences ever. But Grant Hill was calling the game, and as we're leaving the hotel, he's showing up. And I was like, I didn't say anything, but I and I'm a North Carolina fan. Full transparency. And so I froze up. I'm like, do I talk shit? Do I get his autograph? Do I whatever? And we just walked past him. But I was I was so mad because I froze because I'm never gonna see Grant Hill again, face to face again in my life. And I choked.
That's so good. It is fun. You mentioned the UNC thing, and one of my high school buddies was a UNC fan, and thinking back, I mean, that was, you always, I know UNC Duke is still a big rivalry, but at the time it seemed even just way bigger. We'd have our little $5 bets on it and just talk so much shit. It's neither of us had any reason to be a UNC or Duke fan, but then we hated each other because of the random teams we picked.
It was the best. I still have a group. I was texting in it yesterday. I still have a group chat with high school buddies where there's 10 of us, and half are Duke fans and half are UNC fans, and we're all from a suburb of St. Louis. It doesn't make absolutely any sense, but for whatever reason, we all kind of became fans of that. All right, I got to jump to probably my favorite question, which is why I bury it right in the middle of the episode, but. Somehow Pete Overzet gets imprisoned. We won't speak to the crime
for touting Laviska Shenault. Yeah,
exactly. You keep ruining the careers of promising young football players by clipping them on ship chasing. They send you to Guantanamo Bay, whatever. They send you to death row, and you have to choose your last meal. What is Peter Overzet's last meal on death row?
Yeah, and I'm going to take creative liberties. I actually think if I was on death row, the meal, they would just say we can't get that for you. You're not in California. You're in Guantanamo. But I'm going to take some creative liberties. I would get, so my favorite thing on earth are California burritos. I went to school in San Diego. I have a place, specifically Ortiz's. A lot of California burritos are really good, but this place Ortiz's that was right by my university.
Where is it in California?
In Point Loma, near downtown San Diego. But yeah, and it is so good. So for people who don't know California burritos, it's like a carne asada burrito, but the main difference, no rice, and they have potatoes are the supplement for rice.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's something, and obviously they have really good tortillas, really good meat, but something about that concoction is just euphoric. And so I would have two of those. I would have their chips and guac and a big thing of horchata from this
Okay.
place Ortiz's, and I would go out a happy man. I'd be like, I don't even care that you're putting me in the electric chair. I just had 2 Callies. Let's do it.
I love that. That was I don't know what I expected. That was not the answer that I expected along the food lines. Favorite pizza topping. Everybody's very passionate about pizza.
Yeah, this one is tough because it's almost like beer, right? Where it's like your favorite beer, where my answer for having one would be different than if I was going to have like 8,
Very true.
And that's kind of how I'm like with pizza. Like, honestly, like if I'm eating just like crushing a whole pizza, like just give me cheese or pepperoni. I do really like the kind of like fig and prosciutto with a little hot honey on top, like something like that, where we're getting like a little sweet, like a slice of that would probably be up there if I could only have like one slice.
So if you could only have one slice, Peter Overzet is an elitist. But if he's going to make it a meal, he's a common man, is what I guess.
And I'd be the same with beer. Like if I'm gonna have like 8 beers, just give me Modelo like every time. I really like this Maine beer company by me. Like if you're like you can only have one more beer, I'm like, yeah, give me something with a little more complex flavor profile. But I have to think about the quantity there.
I've noticed I've never asked of all the shows and years that we've talked to each other. I've noticed the Modelo thing, and I always found that interesting that that's your go-to. Just like I can tell that Pete's gonna have 6 on the show when he has a Modelo in front of him. You know what I mean?
Not as much these days, but yes, certainly. You want to talk about COVID
This was 4 years ago when we drafted some really, really shitty basketball team that got 300 views that no one should ever go watch again. That was the Modelo.
What are the side effects of having a child and the thinking about not having a hangover in the morning with a baby or a toddler is worth way more than getting buzzed with your bros on a late night show is what I've learned that trade-off. But yeah, I think so. And first of all, I want to say, like, I'm not saying, Modelo has been like a rocket ship as far as like their popularity, over the past few years. Obviously, like the UFC stuff, they did a monster, just like marketing blitz in the US. I want to say I was a little in on the ground floor. I think for me, I love, I mentioned the Mexican food. So like in college, like having the California burrito with a Modelo. And then also like, I have very fond memories of just doing like the all-inclusive trips to like Mexico with like family or friends in high school. And I like Modelo was kind of like my go-to. And I think I associate it with this like warm tropical, like in the same way Corona markets, like life is a beach. That's what it is for me, like with Modelo. Yeah. So I just have this really fond association with Modelo where I feel like, no, it's the weekend. It's a vacation. It's a party every time I have one.
I love that. So perfect segue into another question that's in the queue. Favorite place to go on vacation?
Yeah, man, this is another hard one because I feel like a lot of people probably have this where you go on a trip somewhere and you really enjoy it. And then say the next time you're trying to think of a trip and you're like, yeah, we could just go back to that place we really liked. But then it's like, we only live for so long. Let's go somewhere new. The one place that I've gone to twice and I would still be open to going to again just because I loved it is Costa Rica. And I think my favorite vacations, because I mentioned like the all-inclusive, those are on this extreme. Like you're just going to read a book, drink fancy drinks, sit by the pool. That can be great in itself. And then there's like the adventurous, trips. Like my wife and I went to Iceland and we were like doing hikes and ATV rides and like, that's cool. I like the Costa Rica lane because it like splits those worlds. It'd be like one day we're just going to lay by the beach and drink fun drinks. Then the next day we're going to like go chase waterfalls and like go on this tour looking at sloths. And I like the like half like super fun like activities and then half just like, let's just chill and do nothing.
I think that's there are no right answers, of course, for future guests or for past guests. But if I were to give a right answer, I totally agree with that. And I think most people would too, right? Like everybody's experienced those vacations where you're like, it was fun, but after I'm done, like people say it all the time, like, oh, I'm so ready to be home. I'm ready to be in my bed. It's like, there's varying levels to that. There's the, God, I just felt like I did a week of work. It was fun and I'm glad I experienced it. Right. But every day I went out and I did this and I did this. And it's like, that was fun and cool to experience. But the best vacation is like, I got a taste of that, but also, 2 days I spent 8 hours just laying by the pool, drinking Mai Tais or whatever.
I think about that a lot too, like, because I've had the trips, like the Iceland one, for example. Like, I remember planning that out, like, down to the minute, because it's also like you don't want to waste your time. Yeah. And the cool thing about, like, when we went to Costa Rica, the trip I think of fondly, we had, like, obviously we had booked our places to stay, but we had nothing booked during the day. And I remember, like, literally, like, where we were at, and it's like flipping through and like, oh, there's a cool waterfall that's like 3 miles from here. Let's go do it. And it was just like right then at that moment, we felt like doing it. And I think that's the hard thing about vacations is you don't want to waste time. Like, you can't just spend 2 days getting lost. And then you're like, well, we got 4 more days and have to go home. It's like, you want to maximize it. But those moments of spontaneity, if you can get those in a trip, are the best.
I totally agree. So we're gonna wild pivot. Because this one I think is funny, and I'm putting you on the spot, and you don't have to technically answer if you don't want to. But one of my favorite kind of things is what we like to call start bench trade, start bench cut, right? Whatever. Yeah. How it has taken on many names, but you have to start one, you have to bench one, and you have to trade one. And this is the Swolecast edition. Start bench trade.
Oh, I will.
David Kitchen, Davis Maddock, and our good friend Tuttle, Dan Gasper.
This is awesome. All right, so we're gonna bench Tuttle because Tuttle benches himself like 75% of the episode. So this one's not even going to be hard. He just self-excludes from the majority of the episodes. I'm starting David Kitchen. He is the host of the show. I don't think the show works without Kitchen opening it up with a hear ye, being like sometimes good at hosting, but just sometimes so bad at it. Like, we have to start him. Like, the show starts and ends with David Kitchen. And then I'm trading Davis Maddock, not because I don't want to do the show with him, but I think he's going to fetch the most in a trade. I don't think, Tuttle's too low key. Like, I don't know if other GMs know what he brings to the table. Kitchen, I mean, someone's going to go to his Twitter feed and be like, I'm not trading shit for this guy. Like, right now, you're going to go to Davis Maddock. They're like, this guy's live 8 hours a day. He's tweeting nonstop. Like, this kid's hustling. I think Davis could fetch, a fair purse in a trade.
Davis is definitely the lunch pail guy. He went live he's a Chiefs fan. He's drafting best ball teams on YouTube during the Chiefs conference championship game. So yeah, I think other GMs would definitely respect Davis for the hustle and the grind.
Yeah, that I love how you thought this would be hard, or maybe I wouldn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. No, I was ready to answer that right away. I feel
like you thought about that before.
I did. I didn't even know this question was coming.
Yeah, for anybody listening, Pete doesn't know any of these. I gave him the death row one, but that was just as an example of what was to come. He didn't know that was coming, and it really felt like you thought you had that. That was in the holster.
No, people have been really enjoying the Swolecast of late. Everyone says we're more loose than it had been. Like, which is so funny because people keep referencing, like, now that we're not under the Roto Grinders umbrella, as if Roto Grinders was like shackling us. Like, we never got a single note. We never got, they made us run a Brad's, Chad's, and Dad's advertisement once, but it's so funny that people are like, you guys are so loose without your corporate overlords. I was like, we're doing the same shit we did we weren't worried about RG being like, get shit on track.
Obviously, I'm well aware of the Better Collective, kind of how it all works, and somehow one of the now longest tenured people there, which is crazy because I remember when I started being one of the newbies. And right, I mean, Noto's still around, and some of those guys are still around, but a lot of the people are gone. The people who ran the company are gone from when I started. But I do think people, like, the jokes guys have made about, right, like just like casually saying like, oh, big Better Collective or whatever has like infiltrated people's brains. Like, Big Better Collective doesn't know what the Swolecast is.
Which is why it's no longer there.
Exactly. Like, and it's no offense. I mean, we all watch it. We all love it. But nobody was holding back. The only thing that was happening was, like you said, ad reads or some possible direction about some marketing things that you needed that Dave needed to do during the show. The rest of it was free. They don't care.
No, that I mean, I like, even, yeah, like you said, we fueled that by making all kinds of references to that, which is just like a funny straw man for us to have. But then seeing people being like, yeah, man, now that they're out from underneath those corporate overlords, the show's really in its stride.
Oh God, so funny. Another show you do, obviously everybody is aware of ship chasing, and I just thought with the announcement that Gretch is going to take a pause from the show, if you had any like fondest memories. Obviously, I'm not trying to like put ship chasing in the grave. It's going to live on and be awesome forever, but it is a little bit of kind of a turning point for the show. Do you have any memories that like just always stick out to you about the years of ship chasing?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's funny, you know how like you have memories from your childhood and then you remember like, oh, those are the memories of like the home videos you saw or the pictures. Like, I'm having a hard timing. Like, we've made clips of so many of the best moments that I'm like, can I pull a memory that's not in a clip? Because obviously people know, like, you know, Karade reacting to Kadarius Toney getting drafted, the time I got Sean Siegel to say piss boys. Like, and those are all immortalized in the clips. I'm trying to think if I can come up with, you know, one that isn't in the clips, but it definitely, I mean, one that I don't think is in the intro that goes way back, and this dovetails with like the drinking on a school night. It was a draft. This was even pre-Gretch that me and Pat did with Davis. And it was an FFPC main event or whatever. Or maybe it was a football guys, whatever, it doesn't matter. This guy just kept taking non-wide receivers, and his username was Mr. X. And by like the fifth time, I was like, I'll take a shot every time being like, okay, maybe he goes one more without taking wide receiver. And he ended up going to like round 10 or 11. And I'm just getting bombed. And I remember saying, like, on a school night, and I'm like chugging water because I'm like, this is going to be bad. Like, I said this is a bit, but I commit to my bits. And so I think I ripped like 5 or 6 shots within like the span of like 30 minutes.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's a clip of it on the old ship chasing. I don't think it's in like the intro videos or whatever, but that memory of just like, are you kidding me? And I feel like it's a good moment in that so much of ship chasing has been like big wide receiver versus big running back. And the fact that I had to do a lot of shots because someone refused to take the wide receiver feels pretty appropriate.
Definitely. I will say I'm not trying to advocate for alcoholism, but some of my as a guest and a viewer, someone who's been lucky enough to come on a few times to ship chasing, kind of to your point about like earlier what we were discussing with, like, you know, you feel like you're coming up to the bar with somebody and hanging out with people. I feel like you've also cultivated that with like just the industry people. And I remember, was it the NFL draft? I can't remember exactly which show it was, but there was one of the shows where I think you eventually even went to bed and just left the StreamYard open, or we pivoted to like my StreamYard or something, because we hung out, right? The show was 3 hours, and then everybody that came on the show hung out for, you know, Sanderson, Daigle, right? Gretch. We were all hanging out till like 3 a.m. Of course, it was alcohol. It was alcohol induced, but some inside baseball, right? The people that even come on your show is like, it is like a friendly environment. Like those were some fun memories. My wife would I'd wake up, you know, on 3 hours of sleep, hungover as shit on a Wednesday or Thursday, and she'd be like, what were you doing till 3 a.m? Like talking about if, you know, the Lions pick at 19 was was appropriate value for whatever, you know. And it was like, it's just, that's the kind of environment that was created. So I have a lot of those fond memories as well.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it's funny too, because I think about a lot of shows like that on ship chasing, and we were mentioning like the COVID stuff, and a lot of that is just like, you know, my social life, right? Like, you know, I obviously have friends IRL, but the majority of my social life is online. Like, and it is this weird thing where, say if I didn't have all of this, like hopping on shows with people and interacting, I bet like come a Friday afternoon, I'd be like, man, I should look up what someone's doing. Do you want to meet up for a drink? Like, I got to get out of the house.
Right.
And I'm always like, I'm chill, man. Like I leave my desk and go upstairs to be with my family. And like, I don't have this social itch to scratch. I'm like, I've been fucking scratching that itch all week, you know? And it is this weird phenomenon of like, you think even in college, it's like, I just hung out with your buddies like nonstop. And this has like filled that void, which is a weird thing.
So it's a total flip. Yeah. Like from college, you spent very little time alone and you spent the majority of your time, like whether seeking out or it just happened, being in person and hanging out with someone. And like you said, now it's very strange. It's like you may not reply to your buddy's group text for hours and hours or days because like you're obviously working, but you're getting that social interaction through even like through Discord, right? Or through group messages, Twitter DMs or whatever. It's very bizarre. And I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad. I don't know if it's just in the middle, but it's very interesting because most normal people don't deal with this the way that we do. So I'm kind of fascinated to see what that means. Am I going to be a curmudgeon when I'm older? Or am I going to be happier than the average person? Do you think you're going to be happier with this or worse off when you're 65?
Yeah. And I do think there's a distinction, you know, when we're on shows, I do feel like it's a close replication of like, I think about, you know, I always think about like, I've never met Brick from Lowell's in real life. And we've been doing this podcast since, you know, COVID now. So like 4+ years. And, you know, I would love, like, eventually Brick and I will like have a beer if he's willing to like leave his lake house for once. And we'd have a great time, I'm sure. But I don't think we lose that much. Like, I feel like the conversations we have, the camaraderie, even doing shows or whatever, talking after the show, like it's a good replication of what it would be like having Brick live 5 minutes from me. You know what I mean? Whereas I do think there is a difference in just exclusively, say, like text-based chats. And I love Discord, but like if that was my only thing, I do think there's this weird thing. Like you can't see someone's eyes. You can't see someone's reaction. There's this performative element. Everyone's playing this weird character version of themselves online where it is more distorted in a way that I think could have negative effects like down the road if that was your only thing. To where, like, to me, the socialization, not saying that I don't socialize in Discord, but like it's the shows where I feel like there's humanity to it and we're using technology to replicate something that would otherwise be hard to do.
Perfectly said. No notes. I totally agree. Let's get to some more fun. I didn't get to ask Pat this one, but I wanted to ask you this one. You've assuredly attended a bunch of sporting events in real life. What non watching on ship chasing? What's the most fun or best sporting event you got to witness in person?
Yeah, and I would say maybe compared to most sports fans, I feel like I don't probably have as good of a well to draw from.
Your Rolodex isn't deep in this one, huh?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, growing up, you know, went to a couple Nuggets games, couple Rockies games, you know, Broncos, but I just like never, like I've never, you know, like gone to some big, I've never been to a Super Bowl, never been to a national championship. I went to one Nuggets playoff game. So I don't have anything like, you know, monumental of like, I got to watch, you know, Jordan at the Garden or whatever. But I will say my favorite experience was Pat and I, probably 5 or 6 years ago, went to Mexico City. One of our friends, Aaron, he at the time worked for the NFL. And I think he had just mentioned that he could get some tickets. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to Mexico City. And then I was like, wait, should I go to Mexico City? And so we just went and we went and picked up the tickets at like the NFL thing. And obviously, you know, NFL expanding now into these, you know, international markets. So they had kind of like a big presence there. And, you know, we just went to the stadium early and walked around and we were kind of up in the nosebleeds, but it like didn't matter, like seeing all of these international sports fans. And they all were like Davis Maddock wearing like hybrid jerseys of like their favorite teams or whatever. But it was just like this unique experience to be around all of these Mexican football fans, like watching the Chiefs and Chargers play in a massive soccer stadium. Like definitely one of probably the coolest experiences.
I should have saved or had it prepared. The picture of when you and Davis. I was hoping you would say you and Davis went to I believe a Dolphins game because of Patrick Laird when he was on the Dolphins at that time, and there is a very famous picture which I have photoshopped to make you look way worse, where you and Davis, I believe, are standing on the sideline of a Dolphins game. And for anybody, I assume anybody watching this knows, Pete mentioned he's 6'1". Davis is not 6'1". They take a picture, and I every time still it's saved somewhere on my computer. I switched your faces right on the picture, and it'll make if I should probably use it for any time I want to laugh, because I could still look at your face on Davis's body, and Davis's face on your body is one of the funnier pictures I've ever seen in my entire life. I was hoping you would say that one, so I would feel empowered to go dig up that picture. But it's great.
That one is up there. I think if what happened and why that one doesn't come to the top of my head is because we were so excited for, like, obviously the Laird experience, who's getting the start there. And it was just like the worst possible game. They got killed. Laird got sacked on like a 1 yard kick on the 1 yard line for a safety. And we were going to meet him after the game, which we did, but dude's just like depressed, right? Like just had an awful game. This is a big crack. And so I think that like lingering memory of like, man, this was a cool experience, but what a bummer it ended up being. So that doesn't, if it had got a little better, I definitely think that would have been the top of my brain.
That makes total sense. Like mine is for sure got to see the Blues win the Stanley Cup. And that has some sentimental things from childhood. Like we went to a lot of Blues games and all that. That's probably actually the local team I root for the most, even though it's hockey in fantasy football world, hockey is like not even a sport, not even a sport. But same thing, if I went and watched them lose, I would be like, it was cool because I got to go to an event that like nobody ever gets to go to, but like it made me miserable. So like why would that be a fond memory? Let's hit a couple more questions. I got one I really wanted to for sure hit with you. Let's see. Oh, so I looked this up last night because I saw somebody posted on social and it made me interesting. Do you know any famous people that share the same birthday with you?
I know I've looked this up previously, and now I can't remember. Should I look this up here?
Look it up because I want to. It's just a fun. Again,
this is fun.
We all ran through this list and it was like mind blowing.
Yeah. Okay. So I was born on June 15th. Neil Patrick Harris is the one I remember looking up. Ice Cube.
Wow.
Jim Belushi.
Dang, you got hitters. You got heavy hitters on this list.
Yeah. Wade Boggs. Courtney Cox. Helen Hunt.
Holy what?
Yeah. Yeah. June 15th. Jake Busey. Okay.
Holy shit. Yeah, this is a list.
Some good ones.
You were meant to be famous. You were meant to be famous. I think my Liberace is born on the same. I think he's the most famous. I would have to go back and run through it. But yeah, this derailed a group text for like 5 hours where everyone was going through every single person that shared the exact same birthday with them. I won't mention some of the really bad people that are on there, but so Henry Fonda, Janet Jackson, Megan Fox, Pierce Brosnan, and my personal favorite for me, Wee Man. Wee Man has the same birthday as me. So not quite the heavy hitters that you have, but some fun names nonetheless. And hopefully that will inspire some other people to go look that up because I find it to be kind of a fun little exercise.
I like that. Here, I'll give one football one that I just found. And I don't know if I knew this before. Cooper Kupp.
Really?
The same birthday. Yeah.
Also the same age. Cooper Kupp is about your age, I think. That's why
I wish. I really wish I was the same age as Cooper Kupp, but I got it by about 6 years.
Have you watched? Are you a Harry Potter fan?
You know what? I am not. And I have a funny story about not being a Harry Potter fan. because it got like really. Actually, I don't want to cut you off. What was your follow-up question to Are You a Harry Potter fan?
The question is, if you went to Hogwarts, what house would you be in?
Okay,
But you kind of have to be into Harry Potter to give that answer.
Yeah, because then people will be like Slytherin, and I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know what that means.
For some reason, I remember it was like really popular. I think so. Like the stigma in my head, it was like really popular when I was in high school, and I thought like everyone was like liking it. Ironically, as if I thought it was like for little kids, and I'm like, why are you guys so? It was in the same way people were really into SpongeBob SquarePants around the same time, and I'm like, are you really into it? Like, I understand like it's good, but you just because it's like supposed to be for kids, and it's ironic for you to love it. My famous story for Harry Potter was there was this girl who liked me, and she put it on a tee for me, and all I had to do was swing. She literally said to me in high school, "My parents are gone. Do you want to come over and watch Harry Potter?" And I missed the subtext. I missed the forest for the trees. And I remember telling her, I'm good, Jackie. I do not want to come watch Harry Potter. That's going to be a no for me, dog. Pretty a generational bag fumble by high school Pete.
You pulled what some people might call a Deontay Johnson, where the teams just say, "Buddy, will you just come and play NFL wide receiver for us?" And
he's like, "No,
that's okay. That's okay."
Yeah. Not liking, Harry Potter has cost me a lot through my life.
That's good to know. But Harry Potter has kind of taken off a life of its own for some. Rob and I, you obviously know Rob Coakley, on one show one time, right? Some niche show that didn't get that many views, we went on a Harry Potter like rant about what house we would be in and all this different stuff about Harry Potter, and like we get like people make inside jokes about Harry Potter, right? Like in the Discord and in the YouTube comments and stuff still. So the Harry Potter thing has owned my brain for sure. Now I think more about her, and my wife loves Harry Potter. Like we'll rewatch if the movie's on, any of them. She'll rewatch it. So Harry Potter has become a bigger. I read the books and like it's okay, but it wasn't my biggest thing. And now like I've grown to be a bigger fan at the age of 36 than I was when I was 16.
And I will say to the people before you want to cancel me for what I'm not anti Harry Potter. And I've actually thought about it. I'm like, when April, my daughter just turned 2. I'm like, when she gets to the age, I feel like that would be a good introduction for me into Harry Potter when she's of the age of like reading that book with her. And that will be my first time experiencing it. But yeah, never read a single word of the books, never seen any of the movies.
Wow.
I'm like truly everything I know about Harry Potter is from other people making references to it. Interesting.
You're probably the first person I met that it hasn't even had their own like one-on-one experience. With Harry Potter. All right. So I don't remember. So the one time I've got to hang out with Pete again, peek behind the curtains was speaking of Roto-Grinders, the Roto-Grinders Super Bowl party in Nashville a few pre-COVID, but 5 years ago, something like that. I don't remember exactly. But there was I don't think you did. We all went to a karaoke bar. And I will never forget. I can't speak publicly about what people did at said karaoke bar because they might not like me sharing some of those moments. But I have some great pictures still saved. Kevin Roth, if you ever cross me, you're in trouble. But a lot of people sang karaoke. I don't believe that you did. But if you had, what would be your go-to karaoke song?
Wow. And I will say it's funny you said that because I was just thinking about those Super Bowl parties last night because I was trying to piece together. This is the past 3 years I've gone with like Underdog, not to the Super Bowl itself, but they've done like a content house, do shows and stuff. This year they like pared it way down, or maybe I just didn't get the invite, whatever. I don't know what I've been told. But the previous 3 years, and then the years previous to that, I would go to Roto-Grinders parties because they would always host. And I think I went to 2 or 3 of those. And I was like trying to remember like the last time I was not at my house for a Super Bowl party, which was like hard for me to remember. But yeah, karaoke, I'm not, my Rolodex for this isn't super good in that. I just haven't done karaoke that many times. I will say my favorite song to do would probably be We Didn't Start the Fire, Billy Joel.
Okay.
which I don't even know if people would, karaoke heads would classify that as a good karaoke sign. I just like, so. I don't know. For some reason, I have such like a fond memory of that song. And I always am like wanting to do a parody of it too in my head as well. So I don't know. That's the answer that comes to mind.
So one of my other favorite questions, which ties into this, would it be a different song that you would choose if aliens came to Earth and they're going to annihilate the human race, but Peter Overzet has to sing every word of a song perfectly and they'll leave us alone? Is the song different in this question?
So the answer to this is the aliens are destroying the human race. Because I am not good at remembering song lyrics. Like
I would not have guessed that.
It's a weird thing. Like I legitimately have a good memory of like recall. I'm like good at memorization. There's something musically that my brain just like, it doesn't compute. I am just, and my wife roasts me for it all the time. I actually once thought if I just like really wanted to like roast myself hard, like I could do some content where it's like me doing like blind karaoke or even singing like very famous songs and how many spots I would get tripped up on. Like my brain just does not remember lyrics. So I literally, the aliens would get us like, other than like fucking happy birthday. Like, I don't know if there's a song that I could do word for word. That it's a weird thing, but I am so bad at remembering lyrics.
Pete knows happy birthday and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah,
Star Spangled
Banner.
I
might struggle through Pledge of Allegiance.
That's so fascinating because you're quick-witted, right? The comedy background, and you can think on your feet and quickly. So the recall would theoretically be like you would think would be a strength for you, but in this specific instance, it isn't. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And when I was a kid, like I did lots of I did this stuff growing up called like speech meet, which was like memorizing like prose and speeches or poems or whatever, and then reciting them. And I would do really good at that stuff. I did this, at my private Christian school growing up, this thing called Bible Bowl, which was basically Bible trivia. And I was just really good at that, like memorizing all of the trivia. Like I have that skill, but when it comes to music, it just like,
interesting.
It's bad. I have no musical talent whatsoever.
Very surprising. I think most people will be surprised with that. Couple more quick ones and we'll get out of here. I like this one too. If you got arrested, but they said you couldn't call a family member, right? You can't call someone in your family or your close personal life. You had to call a fantasy football analyst. Who would you call to bail you out of jail from the fantasy football community?
Yeah, was not prepared for this question, and I just immediately knew who it would be for me. I would call Leone. He's like, he's a friend, but he's like responsible. I also know that he would have the money on hand to be able to take care of the bail. I know that he would like handle it delicately. Like he wouldn't be like, why the fuck are you in prison, dude? Like I guarantee he wouldn't ask the question. He'd be just like, yeah, man, I'll help you out. Like whatever. Like I just think he would be like a very soothing interaction during what would I assume be a very stressful time in my life.
That is I think most people will think that is very fitting for Lee.
Who did Karain say?
I didn't ask him. I didn't ask him that one. So maybe I will go back. I'll ask. I'm recording with Pat later today, so we'll interrupt our rookie running back talk that we're gonna have a little bit later today, and I want to hear his answer to that. So quick nugget. I'll release this one before I release that pod, so that people can see that. Another one of my favorites. Just people are dying to know, is a hot dog a sandwich?
You know what? I have a new answer to this, and it is informed by my toddler. And so April, she calls anything that has bread that she can dip. So she loves dipping things into ketchup. She loves dipping things into honey mustard. Those are her free favorite. And she says a hamburger sandwich. She says, can I have a hamburger sandwich? If it has a bun, can I have a hot dog sandwich? She calls everything that has bread and a piece of meat a sandwich. And if this is what, our youngest human beings are processing, I feel like that's a good barometer for it. And I know for a fact, April would call a hot dog with a bun and meat that she could dip into ketchup a sandwich. She'd call it a hot dog sandwich. So that's what I'm siding with. April's right. It's a sandwich.
That's sound logic. I don't think anyone can debate our youth if you'd like to go to battle with the 2-year-old mind, go for it. But I'm not. That's
Good
not
luck.
interested.
Yeah, you want to go battle with my toddler when she doesn't want to do what you want to do? Good fucking luck, brother.
She's not going to get her ketchup if you tell her that she can't call it a sandwich. So yeah, good luck with that one. Are you a collector of anything? Sports cards, coins, not Top Shots, jerseys, shoes, anything?
Not, obviously like going through like the NFT phase. I was never like, I was in it for the content. I was in it for the money. I don't think I actually cared or had fun collecting. I will say I am a little bit sentimental in that I would say I collect like little artifacts from like memories. So like an example, I have a book. It's almost kind of like a photo album, but I put like ticket stubs from concerts or sporting events I go to. So I have that. Like when I get a lanyard from an event, I have like a little bin where I put those and collect those. And again, I do nothing with them. Maybe like once every 2 years, I'm like organizing and I like flip through them and I'm like, oh, that's cool. So I think I'm like a collector of sentimental personal artifacts.
I like that. I think those are kind of some of the most fun ones. It's like, it's not actually, I say that as someone who has like jerseys and autographed pucks and shit behind him, which I do collect a little bit of. But I think the stuff where you go back and it's like, I couldn't sell this for a nickel, but
no,
it's like, but like when I look at it, I'm like, oh, like that positive memory reignites, within me when I look at that thing. All right, this is another one of my favorites that I also like to close with. If time travel was the thing, right? But you could only either go back to the past or go to the future. You had to pick one. Which one would you do?
And I'm going to ask one follow-up question. Do I have kind of like the knowledge?
You
of the
with
present?
your same brain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. For sure, I'd rather go back in time. I think I'm like so scared of like what the future could look like, even in like 10 years, much less 50. Like, I think it would be like more scary. Whereas like if I go back in time, I basically know what I'm getting into. And I think it would be fun, like from a curious standpoint. Like I would probably be like, let me go back and see what was going on with these pyramids. Like send me to Egypt. Let me like walk around. I want to see what the fuck was going on with that. So I think that would feel like more comforting, where it's like you're coming from a position of like power of like, I know where we end up and I'm just going to watch you guys and kind of thing. Whereas I go to the future, I'm like, how the fuck did we get here?
My favorite, one of my favorite parts from when I did this with Pat last week was asking him this question, and he approached it in the most tout way you could ever imagine. He started to describe it as high floor versus high ceiling versus what he started to break it down like, well, this has funny. A low floor and this has a high whatever. And
did he say past had a high floor? Past. And yeah,
100%.
Yeah,
ceiling has the ceiling is higher on the future, but the floor is right. Like you said, you're scared of like what could possibly happen. Whereas the past is like the floor is so high because you know what you're getting yourself into.
What
and
is,
you
what
come
is
with
even
this
the
knowledge.
ceiling? Maybe I am just so irrationally afraid of the future because I'm like, what would delight me? What would I see in 25 or 50 years that
what
I
would have to happen? What would have to be happening? Yeah, for you to be happier in the future. What would like actually have to be happening?
Right. That's why I'm like, I don't know what I'm trying to. Corey needs to paint me this ceiling scenario because I'm struggling to see it.
Right, like flying cars. Who gives a shit? Like, what is gonna change? Well, I can get on an airplane. Like, it's not gonna change my life. I'm not sure. I don't have an answer to that question. I'm not sure there.
I know because I feel like it just involves a lot of like artificial intelligence, like VR, like being in these suspended states where everything is experienced through. I'm like this. I don't want that shit.
Yeah. All right. Very last question, and then we'll get out of here. If you were, they gave Pete an NFL team, new expansion franchise to Peter Overzet. You get to run it. What's one thing that you would do that like is outside the box? Is totally different from. There's something about the way NFL teams run that you disagree with, or you have an idea that a team should implement. What would it be?
Yeah, I mean, mine is probably a little, I don't know, cliche in that like. I'm not like a football guy. I'm not the kind of guy that enjoys like a hard fought game. Like I literally am in this for the fantasy points. Like if every game was like 75-72, I would think that was awesome. So I think I would be the one that was like, all right, no, like we are never kicking an extra point. We are never punting. Like we are literally just going for it on every single down. Like to me, that would be the NFL I want to watch, where I'm just like, there's no taking the points. There's no, it's every single thing is an offensive play. We are going to make like special teams cease to exist. Like that would be what I would do.
There's high school teams and stuff that, and small college teams that do this. And several of them are actually incredibly successful. My alma mater. So, went to a similar to you, didn't come from a small school to go to a bigger school, but right, like 1,000-something kids, suburb of St. Louis, like not anything special. After I had graduated, but we played a team that just like ran through. I always say I'm from St. Louis because I'm a suburb, but I'm actually on the Illinois side because St. Louis is right on the border. And there was a team that came in and played. That's what they would never punt. I watched them go for a 4th and 25 from their own 10 in a high school football game. It's like they don't punt, they don't kick extra points, they go for 2 every single time, and they rolled everybody. Like it helps when you're good, but it was like fascinating to see. Like they gave up a touchdown, they didn't get the 4th and 25. We scored a touchdown, but the mindset. I really actually feel like being serious about football for a second. The mindset of knowing that you have 4 downs as opposed to 3 on every single drive, knowing that a touchdown is 8 versus 7, right? Or is either 6 or 8 as opposed to 7. Like it changes the way you play, and it's hugely beneficial, like from a psychological perspective, because you just know, right? Oh, you gained 2 yards on first down. It's like, oh, if you only have 3 downs, like, oh shit, right? Or you took a sack on first down, like, oh shit, this drive's over. But when you have 4 downs, it's like it totally opens you up to do so many different things that other teams don't have access to.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, like, I get it. If you have a bad offense, right? Like that's not playing to your strengths. Like if your team was just really good defensively, I don't know if I have a good example of one right now, but it's like all of these teams that are, if you go into a game and you just look across the field and you're like, we are a better offense than you, or our offense is better matched versus your defense. It's like, why wouldn't you push that edge? Like, why wouldn't you take advantage of that on every single play? And obviously, some teams have gotten better at it. It was really fun to watch Ron Rivera through.
Awesome.
That was like electrifying. And then even him, like that first opening drive against the Eagles where they kept going for it, getting it. And then they had another 4th down and then he finally kicks the field goal. And it's like, dude,
couldn't help himself
doing it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they lost by 30 or whatever. It was like, congratulations on the field goal. It didn't help you. It didn't help you win.
Because when I was watching him do that, I was like, 1, that's awesome. But 2, like, I was like, I assumed in his head, and maybe I know this isn't how football coaches and people think, but it's like, they should be thinking of like, we're big dogs in this game. Let's take every, advantage or open ourselves up for as much variance as possible to give us a chance to win. And I was like, that's so cool that he's thinking like that, of like, this is house money. We're just going to keep fucking going for it. And what's the worst that happens? We lose and everyone expected us to lose. And then he kicks the field goal. I'm like, what the fuck, man? You were doing it.
It's absolutely nuts. I coach high school football for a little while, and we played against a local Catholic school that's like they're sending a kid to Oregon this year. Like they're really good program, and we were like, I would have categorized this as like 17-point dogs or whatever. And we came in and we said, we're going for it, right? When we punt, we're probably going to fake it. And we designed I was a defensive coach. We designed a defensive game plan that was like, they were all passing. And we were like, we're going to play a 3-3. We always played a 4-man front. We're going to play a 3-man front. We're going to play a 6-man box. And like, they might run for 500 yards. We're like, but we trust that they won't do it. Right. We're going to do all these crazy things to try to insert variance into this game. And we actually won. We upset these guys, won that game. And it was like that. It's funny because I was like 25 at the time or whatever. And I was like, it like changed my, like, I kind of come from that, like kind of contrarian, like think outside the box background, but that experiencing it and it working, you're like, holy fuck, man. Like this is when, like you said, when you're the big favorite, like it's very different, but like there's ways to strategically grind edges, right? That other people are unwilling to grind, and when they work, the upside, right? Speaking of high floor versus high ceiling, like when they work, the ceiling is like you're a 16 seed and you just beat a 1.
Yeah, I know. And it's like it always seems like these teams get close, but then just not willing to go the entire way, which I do think mainly speaks to the media, right? Like they're so worried about getting crushed by public thing. And then they're like, well, then my idiot owner is going to be reading about how I made this dumb decision in the paper. And I just don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with everyone questioning me, which is interesting.
Self-preservation.
Yes,
for sure. The absolute very last thing, who wins the Super Bowl, Chiefs or Eagles?
Man, this is my wife asked me this earlier today, and what I said to her was like, I think the Eagles are the better team, but I've been saying this about whoever's playing the Chiefs for fucking 5 years, and I'm always wrong. But I'm gonna just keep martingaling it and be like, no, this is the time. This is finally the time the dragon gets slayed and the Eagles win.
I love it. Just keep betting on black. It can't be red or green every year. Eventually it has to turn up black. Thank you, Pete, for joining. This is a ton of fun. Hopefully people enjoyed it as well. Going to keep these going every single week and bring back more of your favorite fantasy analysts. Make sure and go listen to last week's episode with Pat Crane, where we got to learn his famous death row.
Was that in the podcast feed? I feel like I never saw that one across my inbox.
Having some podcast issues.
Okay.
Yeah, you know how it goes sometimes. And also I've been lazy. I the last 2 days I've been lazy. That's on my to-do list for today.
Because I was like, I'm pretty sure I would have listened to that if I saw that in my inbox. I was like,
it's only on YouTube. Yeah, but
okay.
Pat gives some great stories about pickup basketball days and playing in his cover band in New York City and a lot of fun. Also, his death row last meal is borderline psychotic. You need to ask him about it next week's ship chasing. You guys had very different.
This was probably some like Indian or Thai food thing, right?
It wasn't. But he was half a meal that people would enjoy, half like putting himself to work, and another half, that's 3 halves of like planning his escape from prison in his death row last meal. So make sure you go check that out. Yeah, I'll get everything up on the podcast feed here this weekend. And of course, Pete, thanks. Everybody, we'll see you guys next week. Peace.